The Napoleon movie was extremely disappointing. I want to say I'm not a historian by occupation. I've always loved history. I was a history major in university. Really started loving history in middle school. And funnily enough, when I was starting my first year in high school, I went to a library by myself and literally grabbed a book about Napoleon. Heard about the name Napoleon Bonaparte, but I had no idea what a fascinating, amazing, troubled individual Napoleon is. And ever since my first year in high school, that's almost 20 years now at this point, I've always loved learning about Napoleon. I will say I'm not an expert in Napoleon, but I'm definitely an avid learner of his. I'm interested by his entire period of time, his different battles, the different events he took place in, his different loves, his different marshals. That entire period I'm very much fascinated by. So when it comes to the Napoleon film by Ridley Scott, I was really, really looking forward to it. And ironically, I've only seen one other film by Ridley Scott, historical film by Ridley Scott, which is The Gladiator. And even then, Gladiator, of course, it's Roman times. It's really hard to get complete factual information. So with Gladiator, it's not historically accurate, but it's a great film. It's a very, very entertaining film. When it comes to the positives of Ridley Scott, I will say that he definitely does these grand sweeping epics when it comes to historical films. Grand sweeping epics, great costumes, great outfits, great settings. Everything is very grand. So that's very appreciated as a person that loves history. So I'm going to first mention the pros of the film. As I mentioned earlier, the costume design was fantastic. A lot of the images of Joaquin Phoenix's Napoleon, where he has the hands in the shirt on the side, or the famous gray-looking coat of his, those looked very great, and it made me imagine, oh, that's Napoleon, right? Like that actually looks like Napoleon. Another thing I mentioned was a great thing about period films, like what Scott does, the settings, right? Did very much imagine I was in Toulon when the siege was taking place. The Battle of the Pyramids that was briefly shown, that was it was great. Like it felt like I was in Egypt, and the pyramids in the back, facing the Mamluk soldiers in the front. That was a very nice scene. Another great thing was the cinematography, and for example, in the Battle of Austerlitz, you see Napoleon in the high ground with like the cannons facing downward, and I'm guessing they're on the Pratzen Heights, and you see the French soldiers on the bottom, challenged by the Austrians and Russians, and that was a very very beautiful scene. And even in the scene of Waterloo, where it's like the soldiers are charging and Napoleon's charging, there definitely was great battle scenes. Like they filmed it really well. It looked great. It looked really nice. I remember a very small detail where like it showed the Napoleon's forces charging into the square formation of the British, and you can actually see the individual like British soldiers marching into the square from like a faraway distance. It's probably CGI, but that was really cool. And the final thing I really enjoyed with the film was definitely the fighting scenes. So the different battles where the soldiers are lined up, where you see them even charging, fighting, battling each other. That's always entertaining, right? You see that with Gladiator, you see that with I'm sure Kingdom of Heaven. These kinds of things are very much, as a person that likes history, we like to see that because we only see still images, right, of people fighting, and it's just, it leads to the imagination of what it was like. So that was very cool to see. Okay, now we come to the cons. There are a lot of cons with the Napoleon film. Okay, so I'm just gonna list them out and then go with all the issues I have with the film. So the first thing I want to say is the movie moves way, way, way too fast. Literally every 10 to 15 minutes, it's jumping like a year into Napoleon's life. There was one moment where he's eating with Josephine, and then literally he becomes emperor the next scene, and it's just like there's no preparation for it. You immediately see him as emperor, and it's like, okay, all right. And then a very glaring, obvious thing was at the end of the Russian invasion, it's a failure, and Moscow gets burned down. It literally shows him being exiled to Elba, literally skipping an entire like year and a half, 2 years of Napoleon's life, where he had one of the most crazy battles ever called the Battle of Leipzig. And that battle, it's like one of the most insane battles in history because it was the largest battle up to that point in Europe. I get it budget wise, that's you can't really make that happen, but it's like mention it, right? Or something. It's just like it just glosses over that. And he lost that battle. Napoleon lost that battle. So the next point's a very minor point, but Joaquin Phoenix, he's just too old. I'm sorry. Like, he's a great actor. He's a very well-known actor. He's a very revered actor in Hollywood. But Napoleon's like 20 something in the beginning of that movie, and I don't know Joaquin Phoenix's actual age, but people don't know this. Napoleon died at age 51. Okay, so Joaquin Phoenix looks like the age that Napoleon could have died at, right? But he started off as like the young version, and it's like it just looks kind of odd. And maybe people don't know this also that Josephine, the wife of Napoleon, is the main love interest in the film is uh, older than him. I believe 5 or 6 years older than him. And of course, it's played by Vanessa Kirby, and she's significantly younger looking, right? I get it, that's Hollywood, so it's a minor point. For me, a book that I really enjoyed by Napoleon was by Andrew Roberts, and for me, it's like the best book about Napoleon because it just gets straight to the point. It offers both perspectives of British people, of the French people, and it just states exactly what's the information about Napoleon and what he did and what happened. He did an interview recently on BBC, and he said the same thing that I'm going to say right now that I've been saying for a long, long time about history films, is that history itself is already extremely fascinating. It's the same logic with something like Napoleon. So many things happen to Napoleon that are extremely interesting. Just the idea of him going to Egypt is kind of crazy because Europeans never really went there for like hundreds of years prior to Napoleon. It's all recorded, right? And it's extremely interesting. It's crazy that these things even happen, and it's all because of one man, right? Now we're going to go into the points of why I thought the film was even more disappointing. Is because it's so historically inaccurate, like obscenely historically inaccurate. Like the parts that I'm mentioning with Andrew Roberts and what I was saying earlier, that history itself is already very interesting. So when it comes to Napoleon, these things are all written down. It's not like, oh, I think he participated in the Battle of Austerlitz, and I think this is how it went. No, everything is pretty much written down, and everything is pretty much all these things have been studied, and it pretty much happened, right? So there are so many historically inaccurate things in the film, and for me as a person that loves history, it's disappointing because this might be the only thing people know about Napoleon ever. They're just going to be like, oh, the director of Gladiator made this. Oh, it's about this person called Napoleon that I've heard of. Let me watch it. And then it's like, boom, 75% of it's wrong. And you're just like, oh, Napoleon was not a good guy, or Napoleon's life wasn't that interesting because it's 20 years in like 2.5 hours, right? And it's just like, that's disappointing. But I'm going to mention several things now that show why the film was glaringly historically inaccurate. The battles in general were like horribly inaccurate. Napoleon never shot the pyramids. I saw that in the trailer first, and then I saw in the film, and I was just like, "What the heck?" Right? He shot the pyramids. That doesn't make any sense. But also the entire scene, like the battle of the pyramids, is such an interesting battle, and like the paradigm shifts of culture. Like the Ottoman Empire at that point was getting weaker, and they were once a great empire, and then the French Empire, or the French, were getting more and more powerful, and it's like modern French tech versus like Mameluke horse riders mostly, right? And it just felt like that famous Indiana Jones scene where like the dude's like throwing a saber around, right? And then you see those Mamelukes, they're just like on horses and they're like shouting, and then like Napoleon shoots the top of the pyramids, and then it just kind of pans off in a way where it's just showing the Mamluks like, oh damn, we can't beat this battle, like we can't win. And granted, it was like a domination. Napoleon completely dominated the Mamelukes, but still, it was just kind of like, like that was it, okay. by shooting the pyramid to show a point. Anyway, another battle thing I want to mention that was very inaccurate was Napoleon charging a battle. That never happened. Okay. On top of that, in modern military history, like the last 200 years, let's just say, military generals do not charge into combat. Now it's different when it comes like admirals, right? They're fighting in the navy battles, but you Napoleon never directly charged into battle on horseback, stabbing people, right? Like, it's just like you may just stab the emperor and like you win the war, right? He's like charging in a battle, and that just didn't make any sense. I get it. That was kind of like the gladiator thing in the movie, right? Oh, I'm just killing people left and right, but no, that never happened, right? The only battle that Napoleon ever really charged into battle was the Battle of Arcole, where he supposedly picked up a French flag when one of his lieutenants gets killed, and he charges across the bridge. Um, but yeah, why would you charge across battle? Like it's you just immediately shoot and kill the French emperor, and the war's over, right? The Battle of Austerlitz is also very disappointing to see because it's one of Napoleon's. It's considered Napoleon's greatest battle, right? The Battle of the Three Emperors, and so many different things happen in the battle, and it really showed Napoleon's genius. Even when it came to him taking over the Pratzen Heights, him charging down the hills, sending in the Old Guard to finish the battle. He used the fog to like support his soldiers from being discovered. None of that was shown in the battle. It was just showing it was very snowy. And then he covered his cannons up with like white sheets, and they didn't expect that. It was just kind of like, okay, I guess he's smart because he covered it, right? Ridley Scott's British. I know that when he made the film, he hired mostly British or British historians, and a lot of people don't realize this, but Britain won, right? The Allies won against Napoleon, and basically they wrote a lot of stuff that basically never happened about Napoleon, and they made him sound like a really horrible warmonger. I'm open to debate this, but there's a lot of historical evidence that proves that he really wasn't. Because in the film, there was a moment where Napoleon, I forget who was next to him, but he was briefly saying, or all the wars will no longer happen because I won't be starting them, or something like that in the film. And then, like, one of his generals or whatever was like smugly looking at him, like, "Oh, really? You haven't been starting them? It's obviously you, my emperor." Now, this is something that people don't realize. Napoleon fought mostly defensive wars. Um, most of the wars he fought were because of the European powers not liking revolutionary France because the people took the power from the aristocracy, right? Um, there was a very famous out of like the seven wars he fought. There was a famous one where it's like he literally made a treaty with the British. I believe it's called the Treaty of Amiens. I think I might be mispronouncing that, but Treaty of Amiens, and literally like a year later, the British break the treaty and declare war on him. Right? Him attacking Russia, that's completely on him, and probably his worst, blunder ever. That's completely on him. And when it comes to him taking over France, and he fights the Austrians in Italy. Those are defensive. Like they all declared war on France first, and he basically fought, defeated them, and made them no longer want to fight. So that's a big thing. The final point I wanted to make about the film was that this part is okay, but it's also just kind of like why is it shows the parallel of Napoleon's like entire life love for Josephine. I get it. Josephine was considered his, you could say, his good luck. He all the heights of his power were when he was with Josephine, and when he divorced her, a lot of bad things started happening. Right? He started giving away different kingdoms to his marshals, to his family. That didn't do well with the population. Some of his marshals even betrayed him when they were kings. All these bad things started happening when he divorced Josephine. Now I get that, but it's not like his entire life was revolving around her, but that's what the film was, and that's okay. That's a stylistic approach, right? You're showing more of Napoleon and Josephine's life, right? The film is called Napoleon, right? And I think that the film would have been better if it was called Napoleon and Josephine because she's in it far more than the battles were, and that's totally okay. And that's a stylistic approach, but again, you call it Napoleon, you're assuming that it's going to be about his entire life, all the battles and wars and different politics and whatever. But a lot of it is just the two of them, right? And again, that's okay. That's just me, okay? So anyway, I totally understand how this is my opinion, and a lot of people might feel differently about about the film, and they might have loved it, they might have hated it, whatever. But that's just me thinking as a person who loves history. I wish it was accurate. It's already very interesting. History's already so fascinating as a subject already, and I wish people, when making films, they could do a little more justice with it instead of just stylistically changing things and just making it their own, especially when everything's already backed by evidence. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm thinking about doing more content like this where I'm just discussing a subject on top of my other content. So if you really enjoyed this, enjoy my channel, please consider liking, subbing, and sharing. So thanks a lot, people. Peace.